So without much ado, we'll be going to the second presentation. And this will be presented by Dr. Okoro Chima of the clinical unit of the Department of Social Psychology of the Lagos State University.
We are passing it on to the future generation. So the future generation will bear a big cost trying to live in this place, trying to mitigate the things we have done to degrade the environment. So we have pollution, accumulation of pollutants in the air, water, and soil. They can have long-term health impacts, including respiratory diseases and cancer. Clean up polluted environment can be costly and technically challenging. For instance, here in our country, where we mine petroleum, we can see what is happening around the areas where we mine petroleum. Up to now, there are still issues of how to clean up spillages in a lot of places. Some places have been rendered almost unlivable, and the cost of cleanup is very exorbitant. Even the will to engage in cleanup most times is not as strong as it should be. There's a video I watched yesterday. It just came up on my phone. I think that event was somewhere in UK or thereabouts. A man and a woman just came up the podium and were shouting, justice for Nigeria, justice for Nigeria, justice for Nigeria. I think one of the oil companies was holding a symposium or whatever, and they came up and they were asking, the two people, a man and a woman, were asking that this company should go and clean up their mess in Nigeria. Yeah, I just saw it 2 days ago. I didn't really know. I just saw it was a few minutes video. I didn't know the history, but I know it had to do with what we have done, mining petroleum, how we have impacted the environment in the place, and how we have made some of those places very unlivable for people. And so we are passing this to future generations. Since we have not cleaned it up, it will be there for years. It's the ones after us that may come to look at it. And also the economic cost of such things is high. And you know, it also has its social and political dimensions, because environmental degradation can exacerbate social inequalities and lead to conflicts over scarce resources, creating a more unstable world for our future generation. And we can look at, if we really look at some of the things that are happening within the country, you can read these into some of the things that are happening, particularly around the areas where we mine petroleum products. And then its effect on health. It impacts our health because increased exposure to pollutants and changes in disease, the health impact. Increased exposure to pollutants and changes in disease patterns due to climate change can lead to a higher prevalence of health issues, putting additional strains on health care systems. So please, the next slide. The psychological response to climate change. There are diverse responses to climate change. They can range from indifference to severe mental health issues, as I had alluded to earlier. A few of the responses, particularly the maladjusted types, the ones that show maladjustment, psychological maladjustment. For instance, there's a concept of eco-anxiety. This is fear of environmental doom. It can be pervasive and debilitating, affecting daily functioning and overall well-being. You can imagine if you come from around the Niger Delta and you come from the areas where the pollution is severe. Personally, I was driving not driving. I was in a bus some years ago, and I came around the area where there was the burning of the gas, the flaring. It's the first time I was coming close to it. And I can tell you, if you come from around that area, you may have this eco-anxiety, because you know that this environment will not really be too good for you and for the people that will come after you. There's also eco-grief. This is the guilt felt for one's own role in contributing to climate change. So you see, if you think that you are part of the problem, you can feel guilt, and it's a strong guilt. It's a psychological thing. There's also eco-anger. This anger directed towards individuals, corporations, or governments that are perceived as responsible, like I had alluded before. So there are a number of psychological, emotional situations that can arise where you have this climate change and how people respond to it. So addressing the psychological responses require a multifaceted approach, including mental health support, community building, education, and fostering a sense of agency and empowerment to take meaningful action. Encouraging open discussions about climate emotions and providing resources for coping and resilience can also help individuals control their psychological response to climate change. There are strategies for fostering individual and community resilience to eliminate stressors. Please, can we have the next slide? Fostering individual and community response to climate stressors involves a combination of psychological, social, and practical strategies. Here are some effective approaches. For individual resilience, you can have education and awareness. Where you have knowledge, if you educate individuals about climate change, its impacts, and potential solutions, understanding the issues can reduce feelings of helplessness and empower people to take action. For instance, what we are doing here today is education. Even as I can see the class of people here, but maybe with time we can bring it down to also other members of the society and bring it to a language and a level that they can understand. So education and awareness can help. Then skills training. We can provide training in practical skills such as sustainable living, emergency preparedness, and resource management. For instance, we talked earlier that global ambient temperature is increasing. One of the ways you can at least bring down that temperature, or at least bring temperature around you that may be a bit lower than what you find outside, is to plant trees. Some years back, Lagos State government started planting trees all over the state. And those trees now, that was maybe like 10 years ago. For the areas where they planted those trees now, you can see it has brought shade for even pedestrians as they walk along the place. And you notice, if you are attuned to it, you see that everybody wants to walk under those shades where they are available, in the streets and the roads where they are available. So one of the ways is to train people that you can plant trees to have a lower temperature around your home. Because the temperature around you under a tree is different from the temperature right under the sun. There's a marked difference in them. Then you can also have, in mental health support, you can have counseling and therapy. We can offer access to mental health professionals who can help individuals cope with eco-anxiety, grief, and other climate-related emotions. So we need to develop a very robust counseling centers and counseling opportunities so that people who have issues can always go for counseling and get some assistance there. We also can use mindfulness and stress reduction. We can encourage practices like mindfulness, meditation, to manage stress and build emotional resilience. We can also have community involvement. Community participation in local environmental initiatives and community groups to foster a sense of belonging and collective efficacy. You know, when you have a group come together, a community, and you teach them this, how to reduce the impact of the climate change, you can have the thing as synergy. One of the speakers have talked about that kind of synergy will bring more results than maybe when it's just an individual or a few people who can attend conferences like this that have the information. So when you get to the level where you have the community and people who are below the level of we who come here now and have this conference, then you can have more people understand this thing and more people take action that will reduce the impact of the global climate change. So there are many other things that can be done to ameliorate this situation. But because of time, I will just go into the essentials. So these are some, there are many more. So can we go to the next slide? Here we say every hand on deck. We see a coordinated effort by all stakeholders will ensure a greater success in mitigating the effect of climate change. Who are the stakeholders? We have governments, we have NGOs, we have international organizations, we have mental health professionals, and many others. We have even, as we have here now, the Bible Society of Nigeria championing it. So where you have all of these stakeholders coming together, you can achieve more, and you can achieve more and at a quicker pace. So concerning government can come in the area of policy and regulation. For instance, they can make legislations, enact laws and policies that promote environmental sustainability and climate resilience, reducing the long-term impacts of climate change. For instance, I said some years ago, the Lagos state government took upon itself to plant trees around the city, certain major roads, trees, ground covers, and all that. And Lagos changed within the period. Now, imagine if there's also a policy that you don't build a house in Lagos without planting 7 trees in your house. It becomes a policy. It becomes a grant for you to get permission to build. Now, do you imagine what Lagos will look like if every house in Lagos has 7 trees compulsorily? If every house in Lagos has a certain level of ground cover, you say, okay, you must have ground cover, that is grasses or, shrubs of not less than even 5 square meters. That it must be part of your house. If we do that, we would have, in fact, increased the number of trees in Lagos by more than 50% of what we have now. And that can also bring down at least the ambient temperature within those houses by a reasonable margin. So this is the kind of place that government can come to play. So they can make such legislations that will help. They can also, in funding, they can allocate resources for mental health services, climate adaptation projects, and community resilience programs. So now when it comes to mental health issues, for instance, in Lagos, we know just a few centers. For a city as large as Lagos, the major places are no more than 4 places. Government, I'm talking about government institutions where you can get mental health services. So government also takes it upon itself and now say in every major general hospital, in every, you have the general hospital, you have the health centers. In every health center, that you have centers where you can receive mental health treatment. Then you can see that we are getting closer to everybody and getting closer to being able to assist all persons who may need assistance. So we can also integrate climate-related mental services into public health systems, ensuring access to counseling and support for affected individuals. We can also have things like infrastructure and emergency response. Resilient infrastructure. If we invest in infrastructure that can withstand climate-related disasters, reducing the physical and psychological trauma associated with such events. And we also have to get ready for emergencies. Emergency preparedness. We can develop and implement comprehensive emergency response plans that include mental health support for disaster-affected populations. I know that Lagos State has an agency for disaster management, but we think that that agency can also be increased. The ambient of their influence can be increased so that where we have these emergencies, they will be up and about to help the population. The NGOs can come in by community engagement and support. They can do some grassroots initiatives. They can work directly with communities to provide education, resources, and support for climate resilience and mental health. They can also do advocacy, advocate for policies and practices that address the root causes of climate change and its psychological impacts. For instance, BSNI is throwing up the issue for us to ponder, to look at. That's one level. Maybe with time, they may also go into advocacy by studying it, taking a position, and trying to advocate that position with agencies and the people that matter. So the NGOs can have play the advocacy role. Capacity building also is another thing. You can have training programs where you offer training to community leaders, healthcare providers, and educators on how to recognize and address climate-related trauma. Also, resource distribution. You can provide materials and resources such as mental health first aid kits and the educational materials to communities in need. For instance, if we really want this to be in the minds of everybody, we can try and target secondary school children. Get them aware of this. So if you get them aware and they now begin to think about it, you can that way, when you do other policies, you see that they can latch onto it because it's been brought to their consciousness. For instance now, except for those who read wide, they may not even notice that there's something happening, that there's a change in climate, and that even the future looks bleak. So, but when you go and you reach out to them at that level, and they begin to hear about it and read about it, then other programs that come on will be easier to latch on by them. They can latch on to those programs and follow more easily. Many other things we can do in that area in terms of collaboration of all stakeholders. We can have studies and surveys. We can conduct research to understand the prevalence and impact of climate-related trauma, informing better interventions and policies. You know what research does, because when you take a research problem and you deal with it, in the end, you can understand the problem better and you can understand how to either do a mitigation or adaptation policy when you do studies. Also, you can share data because each group is doing its work and showing its interest in one aspect of the problem or another. So when they come together, they can share data and experience. And that will be better for each group. Because in solving problems and in research, what you do is you take maybe a certain one or two issues and you deal with those. So each person comes along his own line of solutions. So when you share data, you do more. Please, can we go to the next slide? So, international initiatives integrating mental health support in adaptation efforts enhance individual and community resilience. Yes, promoting international initiative to integrate mental health support into climate adaptation plans offers numerous advantages, enhancing both individual and community resilience, while addressing the multifaceted impacts of climate change. Some key benefits. Now, it gives us holistic approach to climate adaptation. We have integrated care, because combining mental health support with climate adaptation ensures that both physical and psychological well-being are addressed, leading to more effective and holistic outcomes. When it comes to preventive measures, early mental health detection interventions can prevent the escalation of psychological distress, reducing the long-term burden on healthcare systems. Like, when interventions are early, maybe it takes a shorter time to deal with the problem and it costs less. So when we start early, it's more effective and the cost is less for us. There's also improved resilience. There is faster recovery and a lot of benefits. So in summary, I want to say that integrating mental health into climate adaptation plans can strengthen health systems by building capacity and training healthcare providers in mental health care. Interdisciplinary collaboration between mental health professionals, climate scientists, and policymakers can lead to more integrated and effective health systems. So by promoting international initiatives to integrate mental health support into climate adaptation plans, we can create a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable world, better equipped to handle the complex challenges posed by climate change. So in summary, climate change leads to trauma, leads to some psychological maladjustments. And we need to deal with it as early as possible so that we can have better results and at a cheaper rate. And because it's a worldwide phenomenon, it will be good if all hands are on deck to tackle the situation. Thank you very much.